Another day, another big video game auction. That's right, this coming August the 10th, there's going to be a Heritage Auctions complete in-box video game auction. So for those of you who just recoil at the thought of sealed games, this auction's for you. Hi everyone, I'm Doug. Today on It's All Doug in Games, we're going to do a preview of the Heritage Auctions complete in-box video game auction. There's a number of interesting complete in-box games up for grabs in this one, and I wanted to highlight a few of the lots that I thought were particularly interesting. We're going to start with Donkey Kong Jr. Math. Now, some of you don't even know what Donkey Kong Jr. Math was. Well, it was a math game based on, loosely based on Donkey Kong Jr. It was one of the very first titles that were released with the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was intended to allow for Nintendo to appeal to families, to parents. Selling their console is not just a video game system. Again, remembering that Nintendo Entertainment System comes in the wake of the great video game crash of 1983, and Nintendo, being very smart, wanted to position the NES as more than just another Atari or ColecoVision, and by implying that there was educational software in that original mix was clearly meant to be a selling point. Nonetheless, Donkey Kong Jr. Math did about as well with kids as you would probably expect. The proverbial, let's see, how should I put this? It went over like a fart in church, ladies and gentlemen. They didn't sell very many copies of this, so for those who really want that complete set, particularly those black box titles, you got to have Donkey Kong Jr. Math. So we have a complete in box version here. This is the one we're looking at is a 7.5 graded complete in box. There were a couple different print runs of this. This was the original gloss sticker seal print. It is currently bid at $650. Now, a similar copy, meaning Donkey Kong Jr. Math with that first sticker seal print, recently sold for auction at $18,000 with buyer's premium. Now, here's the thing. The copy that sold earlier in the year for $18,000 was a 9.2 complete in box. Now, in the world of complete in box, to amass a grade of 9.0 or higher is extraordinarily rare because you have to have the average of the box, the cartridge, and the manual, the individual grades for those that are assigned to average to 9.0 or greater. So any black box game that grades 9.0 or higher is going to be an interesting achievement and very rare. Now, this is a 7.5, so I really can't envision this getting anywhere close to $18,000. I'm going to go out on a limb, though, and say that this game will make it to $5,000 at auction after buyer's premium. Now, before we move along to the next item, there's something very intriguing about this particular auction that Heritage is doing, and I'm not sure where I land on this, but let me explain. There are a number of situations in this particular auction in the catalog where Heritage has chosen to put up two copies of the same title back to back, with the difference between the copies being that the first copy is the first or an earlier print run, and then followed by a copy of the same title with a later print run. This is intriguing to me because inevitably the second copy to sell, that is the later print run, will in all likelihood, regardless of the grade, get a much lower price. Now, I'm not sure how I would feel if I was the consigner of the later print copy submitted to auction and come to find out in the lineup it's going to go right after the way more desirable copy. Would I want to pull that out of the auction, or would I be resentful that my copy may underperform what I expect it to fetch? Or Could it have the opposite effect, where people have the fear of missing out after not winning the desirable copy, but just want one in general and maybe bid more than they otherwise would? I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment below. What do you think? Is that a good setup for the buyer, the seller, for both? Should one copy and one copy only of a game be placed in any given auction, particularly a special premium auction like this? I, again, don't know where I stand, but I'd love to hear what you think about it. Having said that, let's move on to the next item that we want to take a look at. This is The Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda for the NES, and it is a true first print copy. Now, what you might ask is one of the key features of a true first print copy? In complete in box, we're talking about the box, the cartridge, and the manual. The box is fairly well documented in terms of the round versus oval seal and some other identifying markers that you know right away that you have a first print box. The cartridge, pretty straightforward. It's a circle seal. There's a few other details. I'll spare you those. What is intriguing with the first print of The Legend of Zelda, and not a lot of people are acutely aware, it can be difficult to identify the true first print manual if you don't know one specific detail. The very first printing of The Legend of Zelda manual for the NES has an interesting text difference. I guess you could call it a slip-up, if you will. Keep in mind, Zelda for the NES came directly from the Famicom, the Nintendo Family Computer, the Japanese Nintendo game. So Zelda came out originally in Japan on the Famicom, and the text for the US version was clearly originally translated from the Famicom version. So why is that relevant? Well, there is text on page 11 of the NES manual that is perhaps mistranslated, and it suggests that you are loading not the game pack but the cassette for The Legend of Zelda. So that little eccentric, that little glitch there in the manual is your telltale sign that you have a true first print NES manual. So that's why they go out of their way, even in the description on the Heritage Auctions, to indicate, yes, this is a Zelda first print cassette manual. Anyhow, another interesting part of this particular game, this exact game, and you know this because the wata case, and CGC does this as well, for a graded game, has a barcode and a serial number on the back, so you can tell this is not only a certain game and a version, this is the exact same copy that actually sold earlier in April of this year for $16,800, I'm sorry, after buyer's premium. So it's a little easier to make a general prediction on this one. I have a funny feeling, given that some people will suggest we're in a bit of an economic slowdown, and that this particular copy is now competing with all of the other complete in box money in a dedicated auction. The previous sale was in a more general, a signature auction. I suspect it's actually going to do a little worse. I'm going to go on a limb and say it's going to only get to $15,000 after buyer's premium. Again, time will tell whether I'm right or not about that one, but still a very interesting item nonetheless. Coming up next, let's take a look at Little Samson, another one of those super desirable NES games. It was one of the last games produced for the NES. One of the ways you can see when an NES game is one of the final ones, there's a little red strip on the top of the box that says Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a good game. It's not a great game, in my humble opinion. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments if I'm all wrong about that. But everyone considers that one of the games that makes you an elite collector, or you've got Little Samson. So there's a lot of inherent hype behind Little Samson. This is a complete in box copy, obviously. I don't have a whole heck of a lot of sales history I can find on this, but I'm going to go on a limb and suggest that I bet this will get $10,000 after buyer's premium for this Little Samson. We shall see. Next, I want to talk about a really interesting, actually, set of 3 different lots that are going to be available on this auction. There are going to be 3 lots of European Nintendo titles, complete in box titles. Now, when you look at this, you'll notice a few things. The packaging for the European releases of the Nintendo Entertainment System games aren't necessarily like rectangular shaped boxes, they're more square boxes. Largely, the artwork is similar, but this is going to be a test of the market reality, that the NTSC version of a game draws more money than any other regional counterpart that exists. Nonetheless, I think these are a cool subgenre of the NES collecting world, at least here in the West. I think that people will find them interesting to have. I don't think they're going to set the world on fire. These are ungraded copies listed as average, but there's some cool selections here. In one lot, we have Super Mario 2, we have the original Super Mario Brothers, and an Anticipation, which is, to put it politely, a common game. It's not super desirable. The second lot has Ice Climber, Gumshoe, Duck Hunt, and Pinball. These are the equivalent black box titles in the European world. And then one lot has Excite-a-Bike, tennis, soccer, and golf. I've got a funny feeling, nobody, by the way, at the time we're recording this, there have been no bids placed on these items. I'm sure there will be some. I'm going to go on a limb and say that each of these 3 lots will gather between $200 to $300. And to be honest, I think that that's a good deal, and these are fun titles to collect, underappreciated. Finally, I want to take a look at Super Mario 64. It is a CGC 9.4. Interesting, there is some history here. A CGC 9.4 complete in box just sold this last weekend. Not the same game, but the same grade and the same version. It picked up $1,200 with buyer's premium last weekend. I've actually got a feeling that this is going to do a little better, and I was kind of surprised that I will argue, underperformed. I think this is going to get about $1,500 with the buyer's premium. Interesting to note, right? The Super Mario 64 is also emblematic of the extreme highs and lows and the extreme variance in the graded game world. So why do I say that? Of course, we'll all remember back in July of 2021, the now historic event that really, in my opinion, kicked off the craze of sealed, graded games and high-end game collecting, where the 9.8 A++, basically flawless sealed copy of this game, Super Mario 64, sold for over $1.5 million at auction. So obviously, this is not a sealed copy, but the projected value is about, let's say, 0.1% of that original super high mark. To be fair, I don't know that any copy of Super Mario 64 since July 2021 in any grade had reached even close to $1.5 million. That was clearly the high water mark, and again, a crazy event that kind of kicked off this whole, the interest to the masses, if you will, in maybe we'll say video game speculating, investing, what have you. But nonetheless, it's an interesting title just because of the history of the title as relates to the marketplace. Again, I'm going to go ahead and call it $1,500 after buyer's premium. So, folks, this is going to be an interesting auction. There's a lot of items we didn't have time to go through, but I would encourage you to take a look at the auction catalog. This might be a spot that emerges where, you have different price points for collectors, right? Not everyone can afford to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on every game for the sealed graded. So I think they're going to carve out a niche here where folks who want to get into graded games in general, want to have the iconic game that they grew up with, or the one that's the most meaningful to them on the shelf. And this gives you a little bit of a lower price point to enjoy something that, frankly, in my opinion, displays just as well as a sealed copy on the shelf once it's entombed in its WATA or CGC or VGA enclosure. So I see this coming into its own, and it's an option, again, for the folks who aren't millionaires to enjoy this sort of stuff, and I think that's a good thing. Accessibility to more people is never a bad thing. Folks, I hope you enjoyed watching this preview. I imagine, of course, we'll do a recap video after August 10th when this auction happens, and of course, we'll find out how we did, and I hope you enjoy watching It's All Doug and Games. Let me know in the comments your feedback. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy watching me talk about games, and we'll see you next time on It's All Doug and Games.